Welcome back to the Deep Dive, the place where we turn your accumulated sources, your articles, research, and notes into a high-definition analysis that gets straight to the insight.
It's great to be back.
Today, we are deep diving into a topic that, it affects every single person listening right now, regardless of their profession or, where they live. We're talking about the weekend.
It's fascinating, isn't it? We sort of operate under this assumption that downtime is simple. You just stop working.
Right. It's just the absence of work.
But if you actually analyze the social structure and, more importantly, the linguistic code surrounding our 2 days off, you realize pretty quickly that the weekend is anything but simple.
Absolutely. And that's our mission today, really, to deconstruct that linguistic code. We're moving beyond the vocabulary you might learn in a textbook and going straight into that C2 level nuance. We want to analyze the difference between sounding merely competent about your downtime and sounding truly, well-informed and sophisticated.
Exactly. The sources we looked at collectively frame the weekend not just as a break, but as and I love this phrase, a minefield of idioms, subtle etiquette, and cultural expectations.
A minefield. That's perfect.
It really is. It's a place where your social fluency is tested just as rigorously as your professional fluency is tested during the week. How you articulate your downtime. It really does determine your perceived social standing.
And that minefield metaphor is so critical. Every single section of this deep dive, from the casual small talk to how you review a film, it presents a potential social slip-up.
A place to trip.
A place where a learner can inadvertently trip up or just fail to connect.
Yeah.
So we're here to give you the map to navigate that field safely.
And the goal really is to provide you with the language that manages social expectations, that expresses precise forms of restoration, and allows you to sound fluent not just in English, but fluent in Western social culture.
The shortcut.
It's the shortcut to sounding incredibly polished about your days off.
So let's start at the beginning of that 2-day journey with the required social lubricant, the delicate and often deceptively simple art of weekend small talk. Let's unpack this.
Yeah, let's do it. The exchanges that happen on a Friday afternoon and then again on a Monday morning are like the bookends of the weekend. They're rituals.
Right.
And they rely so heavily on linguistic convention. Understanding those conventions it's the very first step towards C2 mastery.
Okay, so let's set the scene. It happens every Friday afternoon, maybe around 4 or 5 p.m. You're packing your laptop, you're mentally checking out, and a colleague comes over and asks that ubiquitous question. Do you have any plans for the weekend? It sounds like a simple logistical inquiry, but our sources clearly flag this as something entirely different.
That's because, linguistically, this question is identified as a phatic expression. It's a great term.
Phatic. So what does that actually mean in this context?
It refers to language that's used primarily to establish or maintain a social connection, not really to convey actual information. The literal meaning inquiring about your schedule is secondary, maybe even tertiary.
So wait, if the person asking doesn't actually care about my detailed plans, why are they even asking? How can you, the listener, tell if it's a genuine question versus this phatic expression?
That's the subtlety you have to master. Context is everything. A genuine inquiry often comes from a close friend, right? Someone you share activities with, or maybe someone who is asking a follow-up question about something you mentioned before.
Okay.
A phatic expression is usually characterized by its quick, almost automated delivery. It often happens in a passing situation, like in an elevator or at the office door as you're leaving.
So if the person's already walking away as they ask, it's definitely phatic.
Precisely. Its function is purely social. It acts as a conversational olive branch, a way to extend a moment of shared humanity and, anticipation for the coming break.
A social lubricant.
It's a social lubricant, yeah. It minimizes friction as you transition out of the work week by asking, do you have any plans? They're really saying, hey, I acknowledge we both survived this week, and I wish you well on your mandatory rest period.
The danger for the language learner, then, is taking that question way too literally. The learner's trap, as the sources call it.
Absolutely. The beginner response is often honest, but socially awkward. I have no plans, or I will stay at home and do nothing.
Which is grammatically perfect.
Grammatically perfect, but it just cuts off the flow of social bonding. It forces the other person to either probe further, which, they don't want to do, or immediately end the interaction, leaving this slightly flat or awkward feeling in the air.
It signals a failure to perform the social ritual.
Exactly. You failed the social bonding function of the exchange.
So the C2 mastery level response isn't about what you're doing, but but how you phrase it to maintain that social connection and positive framing.
You've got it. Even if you plan on doing absolutely nothing, you frame it in a sophisticated, proactive light. For instance, I'm keeping it low-key this weekend.
Low-key, I like that.
The phrase low-key instantly communicates that this is a deliberate choice for relaxation. It's a preferred mode of operation. You don't have to justify your lack of social activity. It suggests restraint, not isolation.
I find that fascinating. It's not just a description, it's a form of boundary setting, in a way.
It is, and the ultimate efficient vocabulary for this is the acronym R&R. If you state, I've cleared my schedule for some much-needed R&R, rest and relaxation, you achieve linguistic efficiency and cultural fluency at the same time.
Right. Using R&R signals, you're comfortable with that kind of common professional and social shorthand. And by adding much needed, you normalized the desire for rest. You're essentially elevating relaxation to a necessary, almost productive act.
That subtle elevation is the key insight here. The sources suggest this framing is actually a kind of subtle flex on your workload.
A flex. How so?
You're signaling that you are so busy during the week that you must intentionally plan to do nothing just to maintain your performance level. Your quiet weekend becomes proof of your high professional demand during the week.
That's fantastic. So the C2 speaker leverages language to imply context without having to spell it all out. They demonstrate fluency in social context, not just vocabulary. They turn no plans into deliberate restoration.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's Friday. Now, what about the flip side? The Monday morning check-in.
If Friday is the greeting ritual, Monday morning is the postmortem. The question shifts, how was your weekend? And this is where the synopsizing skill is absolutely crucial.
Right. This is where we emphasize the need to gauge your audience. If you're talking to your spouse, sure, you can give the minute-by-minute itinerary.
Of course.
But if you're talking to a manager or a casual colleague, the expectation is a high-level summary. It needs to be concise, colorful, and instantly digestible. You cannot and you really should not overshare.
Oversharing on a Monday morning can be a subtle drain on your professional capital. I mean, it can signal a lack of focus on the working week ahead. So you need language that conveys quality and purpose quickly. If the weekend was a success in terms of rest, use an adjective like restorative.
I love that word, restorative.
Yeah.
Let's contrast that with the typical beginner's response, which is just, it was good.
Good is the linguistic equivalent of a shrug. It's so vague, it communicates nothing of substance about the experience, only a general lack of complaint. Restorative, however, conveys purpose.
Purpose.
It signals that you used the time effectively, that you deliberately sought mental and physical recovery. It's a statement of quality control. I successfully maintain my personal well-being.
Okay, but what if the listener, like many people, actually had a truly packed weekend? Filled with necessary errands, family obligations, maybe even moving, and they were genuinely exhausted.
Yeah.
Is there a C2 appropriate phrase for that? One that acknowledges the tiredness without sounding like a complaint?
That's a fantastic challenge because you're right. We want to avoid sounding negative or self-pitying. Here, we lean on high-energy metaphors. The sources suggest something like, it was a whirlwind. I didn't stop moving.
Whirlwind. That word is key. Why not just say busy?
Because busy often sounds like an obligation or a burden. Whirlwind implies movement, high momentum, and usually a positive, even exciting energy, even if you are fatigued.
Okay, like a whirlwind trip.
A whirlwind trip to visit family, or a whirlwind schedule of volunteering and attending events. It suggests that while the pace was fast, the activities were engaging and productive.
So it's the difference between saying, I was busy and I'm tired now, which kind of sounds like I failed to manage my time.
Exactly.
And it was a whirlwind, which sounds like I successfully navigated a demanding dynamic situation. It transforms the exhaustion into a badge of honor for completing a productive period.
Precisely. It's efficient communication. The sophisticated speaker uses these single, powerful metaphors to convey complex, emotional, and logistical states quickly and effectively, and that allows them to transition seamlessly back to the main topic of professional life.
So mastering weekend small talk is really about mastering the art of linguistic efficiency, audience assessment, and, well, positive self-narration. The ultimate goal is demonstrating social awareness and the capacity to frame your personal life narrative in a way that aligns with, and maybe even enhances, your professional persona.
You've got it.
All right, so once you successfully clear the hurdle of the Monday morning, how was your weekend?
Yeah.
The next social challenge often involves backing up that summary with specific details. If your weekend included cultural consumption, like watching a film, your language has to elevate significantly.
Yeah.
We need to move from simple reports to sophisticated articulation.
This is where the sources demand that the learner stop just reporting on the plot and start providing a structural, a technical, and an emotional critique. You are demonstrating depth of engagement, which is a hallmark of C2 fluency.
The challenge here is moving beyond these thin descriptions. We can't just say, it was a funny movie or it was a scary movie.
No.
Those labels are too basic. They tell us nothing about why the film worked or failed.
We need C2 genre vocabulary. A sophisticated speaker uses genre labels to categorize the film's intent. So, for example, instead of just a scary movie, you might identify it as a psychological thriller.
Right, and that immediately signals that the fear or tension came from manipulation, from character depth and suspense, rather than, cheap jump scares or heavy gore.
Precisely.
Can you give us a few more examples of that essential genre shorthand that listeners should start integrating into their vocabulary?
Certainly. Instead of just drama, consider using terms like socio-political drama if it deals with systemic issues, or maybe neo-noir if it uses classic detective tropes with modern dark themes.
What about comedy?
For comedy, move beyond just funny to something like satirical black comedy if the humor relies on criticizing societal norms through dark irony. Using these terms shows you understand the lineage and the intentionality of the work.
That choice of terminology demonstrates respect for the medium and a capacity for critical observation.
Yeah.
Okay, and if you're discussing animation, we established that you have to move past the word cartoon.
Yes, absolutely. Describing a film as a visually stunning animated feature is the appropriate advanced language. Feature gives it cinematic weight, and visually stunning acknowledges the technical prowess of the animators.
You're treating it as a serious piece of art.
Which is key to sophisticated cultural critique.
Now let's talk logistics. Because the language around how we consume media has also become sophisticated, especially when it comes to going to the cinema. The whole rituals has changed because of online booking.
Precisely. The older transactional language of buying tickets is fading. The modern, more precise language is that we secure seats in advance. Notice that verb choice. Secure implies foresight, strategy, and success in a competitive environment. You've anticipated the demand, and you've ensured your access.
It's the linguistic acknowledgement of the scarcity of good seating in popular screenings. You're signaling that you're an effective planner.
And that strategic planning is undertaken specifically to avoid a sold-out screening. That phrase just encapsulates the cultural anxiety of missing out and the successful mastery of necessary pre-planning.
Right.
And if you're going to a high-end cinema, you might also use language associated with specialized formats, like booking a slot in the IMAX theater or discussing the advantages of premium large formats. Even the smallest logistical detail has its own nuanced vocabulary.
Okay, so moving from logistics to the actual content, how do you deliver a verdict on a film that is more insightful than just, it was bad? We need linguistic tools for softening negative opinions while still being honest.
This is so important. Softening negativity shows high social emotional intelligence in Western contexts. Blunt criticism is often viewed as socially aggressive or, poorly judged. You have to maintain your honesty while preserving social harmony.
So give us the number one tool for that softening.
The foundational idiom is, it wasn't really my cup of tea. This is extremely effective because it shifts the focus from the film's objective quality to your personal subjective preference.
Okay.
You're essentially saying, the film might be excellent, but it just didn't resonate with me. It's an exercise in social deflection. It makes the critique non-confrontational.
That's a great way to avoid arguments with someone who might have loved the film.
Yeah.
But what if the film was clearly flawed? How do we provide a more intellectual critique?
This is where you dissect the film's components. The advanced speaker can identify where the excellence lay, perhaps in the technical execution, and where the failure occurred, maybe in the narrative originality. For instance, the cinematography was exquisite, but the plot was a bit derivative.
Okay, let's deep dive into derivative. It's a classic C2 adjective, and using it properly is a huge sophistication marker. What exactly makes a plot derivative?
Derivative means lacking originality because it's copies from elsewhere, or it relies too heavily on predictable tropes. For example, a derivative plot might use the standard chosen one trope.
The unassuming protagonist who suddenly discovers they have powers and has to save the world.
Exactly. Without introducing any meaningful twists or subversions, you're signaling that you recognize the source material and you find the execution repetitive or uninspired.
So you're not just saying, I've seen this before. You're saying, this failed to innovate within its own genre, despite excellent technical execution. That shows a real depth of engagement.
Absolutely. You are dissecting the execution. You're proving you are analyzing structural elements, the visuals versus the narrative originality. That capacity for multi-layered critique is what we're aiming for.
All right, now for high praise. If you absolutely loved a film, we need language that conveys extreme admiration without just sounding like fan enthusiasm.
You have to use terminology that implies mastery or extreme emotional impact. For a film you loved, you might use a high-impact phrase like, "It was a tour de force."
That phrase, tour de force, is usually reserved for a performance or a piece of art that represents a singular, masterful achievement of skill, right? Or strength or brilliance.
It signals high-level recognition of artistic mastery, whether it's the director's cohesive vision or a lead actor's performance. For example, you might specify, her performance was a tour de force, she carried the entire narrative.
And to describe your personal engagement, you need evocative metaphors, not just basic adjectives.
Yes, you might say, I was on the edge of my seat throughout the entire climax. That phrase physically describes your emotional investment. It indicates successful dramatic tension and high suspense. It is so much more potent than just saying, I thought it was exciting.
So the vocabulary you choose for your leisure critique isn't really about the movie at the end of the day.
Not at all. It's about signaling your intellectual capacity, your cultural knowledge, and your ability to engage critically with the world around you.
It's proof that you don't just consume culture, you analyze it.
Precisely.
Now, not every sophisticated weekend involves navigating a sold-out screening or delivering a cinematic verdict. For many people, the highest form of luxurious leisure is simply staying home.
It is. And that choice, too, has a complex and descriptive modern terminology.
I think we all recognize the necessity of choosing the domestic sanctuary sometimes. So we're moving now into the realm of intentional disconnection, exploring the linguistic concepts of missing out and the language we use to discuss domestic duties.
In the last decade, we lived under the tyranny of FOMO, the fear of missing out. But the sources we looked at highlight the rise of the ultimate counterpoint, JOMO, the joy of missing out.
JOMO.
And this is framed as the truly luxurious form of weekend planning.
Why is embracing JOMO considered sophisticated?
Because it implies intentionality. JOMO is about consciously rejecting the pressure of mandatory socialization and external expectations. It signals self-awareness and maturity. You know what you need for restoration, and you're secure enough in your self-worth to prioritize stillness over social obligation.
So in a hyper-scheduled world, the ability to just say no and prioritize quiet time is paradoxically a status symbol.
It really is.
So we don't just say, I stayed home. We need descriptive, immersive language that communicates that restful intention.
Absolutely. Instead of merely staying home, you are hunkering down. That phrase implies securing yourself, maybe seeking refuge from bad weather or the general chaos of the world outside. It conveys comfort and active coziness.
Or you might be nesting for the weekend, preparing your home environment for peak comfort.
Exactly. And the activities chosen need precision. You might be curling up with a compelling novel. Notice that word again, compelling. It suggests the book is so engaging it demands your isolation, justifying the deliberate disconnection.
And then there is the inescapable modern staple, binge watching a series.
The term binge watching is fascinating because binge typically carries negative connotations, right, of overconsumption.
Sure.
Yet here it's embraced as a positive, immersive cultural experience. This speaks to a shift where deep engagement with a single narrative over a short period is now accepted as a legitimate, high-value form of restoration.
Plus, being up to date on popular series is a form of cultural currency. You almost need to binge to be fluent in the Monday morning water cooler conversation.
You do.
JOMO, then, is a rejection of the quantity of activities in favor of the quality and depth of rest and engagement within one's own space. And it requires a sophisticated linguistic framework to describe successfully.
However, even the most intentional JOMO session often has a less glamorous counterpoint, the necessity of addressing what we call the backlog of domestic duties.
Yes, the administrative tasks of life that simply cannot be ignored, even when we're meant to be relaxing.
Yeah.
This is where we shift from passive relaxation to productive action.
And the language reflects this. It's the language of deficit and action. We say we need to catch up on housework.
Catch up.
That framing, catch up, explicitly implies that we have fallen behind, creating a deficit that the weekend must resolve. It turns cleaning not just into a chore, but into a corrective action necessary to restore order before the new week begins.
That's a crucial distinction. It validates the time spent on chores as necessary mental maintenance. What about the decisive verbs we need? You can't just do chores.
We need language that conveys decisive effort and conquest. For example, you don't just wash your clothes, you need to tackle the laundry. You might wrestle with the finances or clear out the clutter.
Tackle imbues the task with a sense of decisive effort. It makes the chore sound less passive and more like a necessary victory over domestic chaos.
And then there's the distinction of the clean itself. You might start your weekend with a surface tidy up if the mess is minor, but if it requires serious effort, you commit to a deep clean.
Right.
That term implies meticulous effort, going beyond just the visible dirt to restore the pristine state of the environment. And the sources connect this linguistic concept directly to the mental benefit, which is the psychological payoff.
Absolutely. The commitment to a pristine environment often leads to a pristine state of mind. Our sources connect this to cognitive load theory. By tackling and completing these domestic deficits, you're reducing the mental friction caused by unfinished tasks.
It's a form of productive procrastination.
It is. You might be temporarily putting off work, but you're actively creating a sanctuary and reducing future mental stress. The sophisticated speaker understands and can articulate this complex psychological connection.
So domestic leisure fluency involves not just describing the fun parts, but also acknowledging and giving linguistic weight to the structural necessities that enable that ultimate rest. You're creating the foundation for successful JOMO.
Exactly.
Let's transition now from the intimate domestic sanctuary to external social environments. Dining out, particularly in sophisticated or trendy settings, is a social performance governed by strict linguistic and behavioral rules that we need to master.
Dining out is often a social anchor of the weekend, a marker of celebration or a major catch-up event. And the rules governing the logistics, the structure of the meal, and the financial transaction are highly conventionalized in Western settings.
So getting these details wrong is a major marker of social illiteracy.
It really is.
The first barrier, if you are attempting to eat at any popular location, is planning ahead.
Planning is crucial. If you're aiming for a coveted establishment, a restaurant that is highly desirable, exclusive, or difficult to get into a reservation is mandatory.
Using the word coveted instantly signals that you're aware of the venue's social value and exclusivity.
Yes, you're showing awareness of the dining ecosystem.
And making a reservation isn't just about securing a table, it's an implicit social contract. It signals respect for the venue's time and effort in managing its flow.
Precisely. You're signaling you are not demanding a special treatment or expecting a spontaneous accommodation in a high-demand environment.
Okay, so once you're seated, the next critical linguistic step is menu navigation.
This is where we define the fixed terms that structure the formal meal. In high-end dining, you have to know the 3 stages: appetizers or starters, entrees, the main courses, and desserts.
And that confusion over entree is a classic slip-up for international learners, isn't it? The term literally means entry in French, but in U.S. English, it signifies the main event.
It does. Using it correctly is definitely a sophistication marker. It shows you're familiar with the culinary tradition. And if you want to push your fluency even further, you can move beyond these 3 basic stages.
How so?
In fine dining, you might encounter an amuse-bouche, which is a single complimentary bite from the chef, or you might discuss the need for a palate cleanser between courses. The ability to use these terms shows you understand the structured cadence of a formal meal.
You might also discuss pairing.
Exactly. The language used when selecting a wine to complement your chosen entree, often involving a conversational exchange with the sommelier. The more specific you can be about the structure of the meal, the higher your perceived fluency is in that cultural ritual.
But the real linguistic and behavioral test arrives when the check or the bill is presented.
Yes. This moment is a financial transaction layered with complex social dynamics.
When dining in a group, the ritual of settling the bill requires precise idioms to avoid awkwardness. What is the standard practice?
In Western dining cultures, particularly the US and UK, the default simplified financial practice is often to split the bill. This implies a simple, equal division of the total cost among all parties, regardless of who ordered the expensive steak or the cheaper salad.
But if there are significant price differences, that can lead to resentment. And that's where the essential idiom comes in, to go Dutch.
To go Dutch is the idiom used when each person pays only for what they ordered. It's considered slightly more precise and fair than a simple split, especially when one person consumes significantly more expensive items or maybe didn't drink alcohol. The phrase is ubiquitous, and using it correctly signifies advanced comprehension of social financial norms.
Let's talk about the non-negotiable social obligation in places like the United States. Tipping, or gratuity.
Gratuity. The sources stress this point because it is a major friction area for international visitors. Tipping is not just a bonus, it is a social obligation.
Right, particularly in the U.S. service industry model where servers' wages rely so heavily on tips. To fail to tip adequately is to fundamentally misunderstand the local economic and social structure.
It is.
And what is the standard expectation in the U.S.?
While this varies a little bit by location, the accepted standard for restaurant service is typically 15% to 20% of the pre-tax bill. Anything below 15% signals dissatisfaction with the service.
So if you choose to fail this obligation, to leave a meager tip, what is the social consequence?
The consequence is that you have committed a faux pas, and we should define this term rigorously. Faux pas, it's French for false step, and it's a social blunder or mistake that signifies a lack of social awareness, grace, or tact.
So think of a faux pas not just as a mistake, but as a dropped note in a complex social symphony.
Exactly. Leaving a meager tip is not just poor financial practice. It is a public signal to the staff and potentially to your dining companions that you are socially illiterate regarding local etiquette. It is a failure of social grace that can leave a deeply negative impression.
The lesson here is that sophisticated communication involves performing the correct financial rituals that accompany the spoken language.
Absolutely.
Okay, when we leave the public performance of the restaurant and move to a private social setting, whether hosting a party or being a guest, the linguistic and behavioral expectations become even more focused and subtle, almost like theatrical production.
This is where we assess true social intelligence. These private rituals rely less on transactional efficiency and more on maintaining harmony and demonstrating respect for effort.
So let's start with the host. Hosting is framed as an art form. It requires a difficult balance. The host must be attentive without being overbearing. That phrase captures the delicate nature of high-level hosting.
Being attentive means ensuring your guests are comfortable, that they have drinks, know where the facilities are, and that their dietary needs have been met without them having to ask repeatedly.
And being overbearing.
That means hovering, interrupting deep conversations, or forcing structured activities. The successful host facilitates the evening. They do not dominate it. They create the space for others to relax.
And the host's responsibility starts the moment guests cross the threshold. They're responsible for the ambience.
Ambiance, a critical C2 term. It refers to the character and atmosphere of a place. The host is the architect of this. This might involve choosing the right lighting, curating the background music, or ensuring the home is comfortable and clean. The physical environment has to be meticulously managed to encourage relaxation and social interaction.
And if the host has invited people who don't know each other, active social facilitation becomes crucial.
Absolutely. The host must facilitate conversation, often by finding common ground between strangers. This involves skillful introduction. You don't just say, "This is Sarah, this is John." You introduce them by their shared interests. Sarah loves to hike, and John was just telling me about his recent hiking trip in the Rockies. The host acts as a social mediator, ensuring a smooth flow of dialogue among disparate personalities and minimizing the potential for awkward silence.
So the host's linguistic role is to be the subtle yet powerful catalyst for social enjoyment.
Exactly. Now, the other side of the coin. The guest's code of conduct. As a guest, you have to demonstrate your respect for the host's effort through your behavior, starting with the most basic rule of all, punctuality.
Punctuality is paramount. But this is where the nuance is required. What is the difference between being fashionably late and being actually late?
Fashionably late is often interpreted as arriving within a small window, say 10 to 15 minutes after the stated time. This is a subtle social allowance, giving the host a buffer for last-minute preparations without guests watching them frantically light candles or put finishing touches on the food.
It suggests a relaxed attitude.
It does. But if you cross that line,
You become actually late.
if you become actually late, 30 minutes or more, you move into the realm of rudeness. This demonstrates a disregard for the host's schedule, the timing of the meal, and the other guests. It is a social failure. You are essentially demanding that the entire evening pause for your arrival.
The second non-negotiable rule is the custom of showing gratitude through a gift.
A guest should never arrive empty-handed. The gift, whether it's a bottle of wine, a bouquet of flowers, or artisanal chocolates, is designated as a token of appreciation.
A token of appreciation.
It's a symbolic gesture showing respect and gratitude for the hospitality. It's important to note that the gift shouldn't demand immediate action from the host, like bringing a dessert that requires specific plating or chilling. The goal is to ease the host's burden, not add to it.
Finally, the exit strategy. Leaving correctly is just as critical as the entrance for maintaining a positive impression.
You never just disappear. You must make your excuses. This is a key linguistic ritual. You politely approach the host and inform them of your need to depart, often citing a vague, inoffensive reason, like needing to travel home, having an early start tomorrow.
Or just having reached the comfortable end of the evening.
Exactly. It softens the departure, ensuring the host feels no obligation to try and keep you or worry that their party has failed to keep you entertained.
And before you leave their property, the final necessary phrase.
You must express explicit gratitude for the hospitality. This completes the social transaction, leaves a lasting positive impression, and ensures you are invited back. The flawless execution of the guest's code of conduct is the definitive demonstration of high social intelligence.
We've spent this deep dive detailing the language of leisure itself, but we have to conclude by exploring the underlying philosophy. The reason this linguistic framework even exists, it is all in service of the concept of restoration.
It is. All the etiquette and sophisticated vocabulary we discussed serves a singular psychological purpose, making the weekend an effective counterweight to professional lives, aimed squarely at achieving that elusive work-life balance.
Elusive is the right word for it.
The concept of the weekend as a counterweight implies a necessary opposing force to the demands of the working week. Historically, the advent of the two-day weekend was a victory for labor rights, designed to guarantee mandatory rest.
But in the hyper-connected digital age, that essential counterweight is constantly being undermined.
Constantly. The sources note that we carry our offices in our pockets. The smartphone has become the ultimate enemy of restoration because it makes us permanently accessible.
Right.
That ability to check an email, answer a quick query, or review a document on a Saturday afternoon instantly erodes the counterweight effect, leading to the mental state we need to discuss: burnout.
The word burnout is tossed around a lot. Yeah, how do we define it clinically? I mean, how is it different from just being stressed or tired?
This distinction is vital for C2 fluency. Stress is generally acute pressure. It's manageable, often short-term, and it involves feeling too much.
Okay.
Burnout, however, is a serious, recognized state of emotional, physical, and mental exhaustion caused by prolonged, excessive, and often unmanaged stress. It involves feeling empty and mentally detached. It's not just needing a nap. It implies a fundamental depletion of resources that requires significant time to recover from.
The fact that we need specific, clinical-sounding terminology like burnout proves how pervasive the problem of boundary erosion has become in modern professional life. The social pressure to be always on is immense.
It is. The social pressure to be responsive, to check messages on a Sunday evening, to show commitment by answering an email at 10 p.m., that's what causes burnout.
Right.
And we need specific language to describe this digital intrusion, terms like pinging me after hours or talking about the tyranny of the notification.
The language reflects the reality that the office is constantly trying to sneak past your personal defenses. It creates a necessity for specialized vocabulary to discuss professional sustainability and mental health, because saying, "I need a rest," is no longer enough to communicate the severity of the modern plight of overwork.
Exactly. So if the digital age is blurring the lines, what is the advanced language for pushing back and truly achieving restoration?
It starts with the vocabulary of action and assertion. You have to assert yourself linguistically.
We talk about setting boundaries. This refers to actively and assertively establishing limits on professional intrusion during personal time. A simple, "I will address that Monday morning," is often more effective than a passive apologetic response like, "Oh, I can't right now."
You're asserting a policy, not making an excuse.
Exactly. We also use the verbs unplug or disconnect, specific active terms that mean deliberately switching off digital communication channels.
The ultimate goal is that the weekend is not just for leisure. Its core purpose is for restoration, to recharge your batteries. That metaphor, recharging batteries, is extremely powerful and universally understood as a physiological and mental necessity.
And this restoration takes different forms, which requires linguistic precision. We distinguish between active recovery and sedentary recovery.
Tell us more about that distinction.
Active recovery involves movement and vigorous exercise, like a challenging hike, kayaking, or a long run. The psychological benefit here is often that the physical effort forces the mind to focus on the immediate task, overriding professional anxieties. It's a form of mental reset through physical exhaustion.
And sedentary recovery covers what we discussed earlier, JOMO, reading, binge watching.
Yes. The benefit there is often focused on reducing sensory input and allowing the brain to simply rest and process. Both forms are valid, but using the correct terminology, active versus sedentary, demonstrates you understand the science of recovery and can articulate your chosen method precisely.
The ultimate philosophical concept driving all this discussion, from small talk to boundary setting, is the necessity to compartmentalize.
Compartmentalization is the psychological and linguistic skill of mentally separating different aspects of your life. Work belongs strictly to the weekdays. The weekend belongs strictly to the self. It's a time to reclaim your identity beyond your job title.
And your linguistic choices must enforce this separation.
They have to. If you describe your weekend only in terms of professional obligation, I had to catch up on emails, or productive chore management alone, you risk losing that essential separation, and the entire restorative purpose of the weekend just collapses.
The ability to describe your leisure time with sophisticated restorative language is the proof that you have successfully achieved that compartmentalization and are viewing yourself as a holistic human being, not just a professional automaton.
And that ultimately is the highest level of fluency. Self-awareness articulated through complex linguistic performance.
This has been a truly comprehensive deep dive, linking the smallest social exchanges directly to major psychological concepts like burnout and identity. Before we wrap up, let's quickly review the 4 pillars we've covered, which are your key takeaways for achieving advanced fluency in leisure linguistics.
First, master nuanced small talk. Move beyond simple, vague adjectives. Utilize high-impact framing like restorative or whirlwind to provide meaningful, socially aware synopsis of your weekend, demonstrating you are intentional about your time.
Second, build a library of specific vocabulary related to cultural and domestic life. This means using precise terms like psychological thriller, cinematography, ambiance, and the financial term gratuity, proving you engage critically with your environment.
Third, internalize the rules of social grace. This means understanding the underlying etiquette of hosting and being a guest, the social obligation of tipping, and the need to use linguistic tools to politely conclude interactions like using make your excuses to avoid committing a faux pas.
And finally, fourth, practice deep discussion. You have to be able to articulate complex feelings about professional pressure and mental health using sophisticated language, discussing concepts like burnout, the strategy of JOMO, and the necessity of setting boundaries.
If you can master these 4 areas, your conversations about your days off will signify not just language fluency, but true cultural competence and social polish.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? If the language we use for our leisure time is, as we've established, a sophisticated linguistic performance designed to manage social perceptions, what does your own current vocabulary say about the value you truly place on your time away from work?
And consider this. How can upgrading your language using terms like restorative and compartmentalize actively help you enforce the very boundaries you need for true restoration? Because the language you use to describe your boundaries is often the only thing standing between you and burnout. It's something truly worth mulling over on your next Saturday morning.
A profound challenge to end on. That is it for this deep dive. We hope this analysis helps you navigate your next weekend with confidence, sophistication, and most importantly, intentional rest. We'll talk to you next time.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Our job is to take a stack of your sources, extract the absolute most valuable nuggets of insight, and deliver them to you with the clarity and depth you need.
Today, we've been given a truly fascinating mission. We're looking at advanced communication skills, specifically those that sit at that C2 level of English proficiency.
Right.
But we're grounding them in something everyone can relate to.
Oh,
the weekend.
That's right. And our listener mission today isn't just about, learning some new vocabulary for your hobbies. We're going so much deeper. The goal is to extract the subtle skills, the linguistic architecture, really, that takes your language from just functional to truly proficient and strategic. We're diving headfirst into pragmatics.
And pragmatics sounds like a technical term, but it's really just the hidden rules of conversation.
Exactly. The hidden rules of managing your social boundaries, optimizing how you rest, and navigating that really tricky psychological jump back into the work week.
It's funny. The weekend, when you think about it, is just this condensed 48 or 72-hour window.
Yeah.
But it's a perfect microcosm of life itself.
A microcosm of life. I like that. What do you mean?
Well, if you really analyze the advanced language people use during that window, you find everything.
Yeah.
You find negotiation, you find the pursuit of mastery, self-regulation.
And that eternal tension, right, between rest and productivity.
Exactly. And the expert material we've synthesized today really focuses on how proficient communicators use language to optimize all of those terrains.
So the sources themselves, they're drawn from some pretty advanced linguistic and cultural analyses, and they make it clear that we are moving far beyond just, I went for a run.
Oh, miles beyond that.
We're analyzing the strategic intent behind the words, the why and the how, why you seek out something like vitality, and how you manage these really complex social pressures. We're moving from just description to real analysis.
And that is the core difference between simple fluency and true proficiency. Fluency is just, using the language correctly.
Yeah.
Proficiency is using the language strategically to achieve a very specific social or psychological goal. It's language as a tool.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's get into the structure. We've distilled 4 core areas from the source material that really define what we're calling weekend mastery. First up, we're going to tackle the language of movement, vigorous vocabulary for active recovery.
Then second, we confront what is, I think, maybe the trickiest social skill of all, the delicate art of the soft no. It's a complete masterclass in politeness strategies and, crucially, boundary setting.
Love that. Third, we're going to look inward. We'll explore personal fulfillment through the psychology of intrinsic motivation, looking at avocations, hobbies, and that amazing sought-after state of flow.
And finally, we have to address the shadow that falls over every Sunday evening. We're going to be identifying and managing those insidious feelings that are encapsulated in the term the Sunday scaries.
All right, a lot to get through. Let's jump in with the language of motion.
Let's do it.
So for the vast majority of us, let's be honest, the working week is defined by being sedentary.
Oh, completely. You're locked into a desk. You're staring at a screen.
Yeah.
You're sitting through meeting after meeting.
And the sources confirm that this physical inertia, it requires a really forceful, really intentional counter strategy on the weekend. And they define it using the excellent term, active recovery.
Precisely. And it's such a great phrase. The experts in these materials, they define active recovery as the strategic choice to find relaxation, not in stillness.
Right. Not on the couch.
Not in what they call sedentary relaxation, exactly like binge watching a show, but specifically in motion. It's a structured approach. It functions as an absolutely necessary physical antidote to that typical office lifestyle.
A physical antidote. I love that.
Yeah. If your week is primarily mental, your weekend antidote has to be primarily physical. It's about rebalancing the system.
And the language we use, even before we describe the activity itself, the language we use to articulate this need for movement is already so rich with metaphor and idiom. Think about the common reasons we give. I really needed to burn off some steam, or I just wanted to get the endorphins flowing.
Burning off steam is such a classic example of high-level idiomatic English. It relies on this physical, almost mechanical metaphor.
Yeah, like an old steam engine or something.
Exactly. It implies that stress or excess mental energy, or maybe just this low-level frustration, has been building up under pressure, just like water boiling inside a closed kettle.
Mm-hmm.
And that energy, it's potentially destructive if you keep it contained.
So the physical exertion, the run, the bike ride, whatever, it acts as the pressure release valve. You're not just moving your body. You are symbolically and chemically managing all this built-up internal pressure. It's such a vivid explanation that goes so far beyond just saying, I feel stressed.
It really does. And then linking that immediately to the neurochemistry, getting the endorphins flowing, that elevates the conversation even further. Mm-hmm. You move from that mechanical metaphor to a full-on biochemical explanation for your motivation.
Right. You're not just exercising to meet some external goal, like, a target weight on a scale.
No, not at all. You are specifically seeking a scientifically proven feel-good result. You're aiming for that natural high to completely reset your system. It's self-medication in the healthiest way possible.
So that's the why. Now, when we look at the vocabulary used to describe the activities themselves, this is where C2 proficiency just truly shines. The material suggests that proficient communicators, they just avoid generic descriptions. They don't just say they were walking on a trail.
No, they choose verbs that convey purpose and difficulty and commitment. So instead of walking, they might say they were hired to traverse a trail, Or maybe that they spent the morning exploring the terrain.
Okay, let's break that down. Traverse. Why is traverse a more advanced, a more strategic choice than just walk or even hike?
Well, traverse inherently implies moving across or through something that's challenging or complex. It suggests large distances or difficult topography.
So there's an obstacle involved.
There's an obstacle, or at least a sense that the path itself presented challenges. It suggests the speaker had a specific, maybe even ambitious goal in mind. There's a sense of purpose. A walk can be completely aimless, which is fine, but a traverse is intentional. And that single verb choice, it immediately heightens the entire narrative value of the activity. It makes it sound more epic.
It does. It sounds more impressive. And we also see this fantastic array of sensory and environmental vocabulary. So instead of just saying, I was outside or I was in the country.
Which is so bland.
So bland. The source material highlights phrases like immerse yourself in the wilderness, or for a different vibe entirely, seeking solitude in a pastoral setting.
Immerse yourself is so key there. It's the difference between just, dipping your toe in the water and a full body submersion.
Yeah.
It implies total sensory and mental presence, a complete soaking in of the natural environment, which is the mental equivalent of leaving your work life completely and totally behind.
Right.
You're not checking your phone, you're immersed.
Yeah. And that other phrase, pastoral setting, is a fantastic marker for advanced vocabulary. How would you differentiate pastoral from related words like rustic or wild? They all kind of mean out in nature, right?
They do, but that's where the nuance is.
Yeah.
Wilderness implies something untamed, raw, maybe even a little dangerous.
The deep woods.
Exactly. Rustic refers to something simple, old-fashioned, a bit unsophisticated, often associated with, like a log cabin or handmade furniture. But pastoral specifically evokes this idyllic, highly romanticized vision of the countryside. You should be thinking fields, sheep, rolling hills.
That's a painting.
Precisely. Cultivated land that is peaceful and visually pleasing. It's a very particular kind of gentle, peaceful vibe that suggests retreat and harmony, not challenge or danger. So the choice of pastoral immediately communicates the desired emotional register of the experience you were seeking.
The analysis in the sources really demonstrates that this specialized vocabulary, traverse, immerse, pastoral, it all emphasizes a deeper, more intentional engagement with the environment. It's not about logging your steps on a fitness app.
Not at all.
It's about the conscious quality of the experience and its psychological effect.
And that brings us directly to the mental dividend of active recovery. Because the physical act, that's just the delivery mechanism for the psychological result.
Which is perfectly captured by this wonderful idiom, clearing the cobwebs.
That is just rich, top-tier C2 vocabulary. If we really analyze that metaphor, what are cobwebs? They're dusty, they're tangled, they're stagnant.
Things that build up in a corner you neglect.
Exactly. They imply neglect and mental stagnation. They are the accumulated detritus left over from repetitive tasks or stress that has just built up over the course of the week.
And the act of clearing them, it implies a forceful cleansing action. It's not passive.
No, it's active. The source material confirms that the metaphor suggests the fresh air, the exertion, the speed. They act like a powerful broom or a strong gust of wind, literally sweeping away that mental fog or the sedentary buildup. A C2 speaker might formally say something like, achieving cognitive restoration.
Which sounds very clinical.
Very clinical. But clearing the cobwebs is so much more vivid, more relatable, and it signals a true idiomatic mastery. You're exchanging physical energy for mental clarity.
So we're achieving cognitive renewal through essentially sweat equity. But the motivations, they run even deeper than just clarity. The sources really emphasize that these active pursuits are chosen for the specific psychological returns they provide. They reinforce vitality and rejuvenation.
Yeah, and let's use the examples provided in the material to illustrate the different types of returns you can get. So if you choose an activity that is individual and physically demanding, like say scaling a mountain,
Okay.
the primary return there is psychological. It's for you.
And that activity is intrinsically tied to achieving a deep sense of accomplishment.
Of course. And look at the verb again, scaling. It's a verb of ambition. It suggests effort, overcoming gravity, and reaching a very specific goal, the summit. For so many professionals whose work results are, abstract or digital or collaborative.
An email that just disappears into the ether.
Exactly. The physical, non-negotiable success of reaching a peak provides this undeniable, concrete psychological boost. It affirms your capability in a very real, tangible way.
Okay, now let's contrast that with the goal of participating in, say, team sports. Here, the primary psychological return. It shifts entirely.
Completely. It's now about fostering camaraderie.
It's the social return.
100% a social return. It shifts the focus from that individual challenge to collective support and shared experience. The activity is less about the physical act itself and more about the real-time social interaction, the cooperation required to win, or even just to participate effectively.
So for individuals who maybe work remotely or in highly isolated roles,
this is critical. For them, this focused, non-work-related social interaction acts as a vital reset button. It refills the social tank that the work week drains.
So the takeaway from this first section is really powerful. A successful weekend doesn't just happen, it's engineered. The active pursuits are intentionally selected, whether it's for solitude in a pastoral setting, the cognitive boost of clearing the cobwebs, or the camaraderie of a team, to deliver these specific psychological and social returns that counter the deficiencies of the work week.
And the ability to articulate those nuances, the why behind your choices, using this highly specific vocabulary, that is the absolute hallmark of C2 proficiency.
So once you've prioritized and, hopefully achieved that personal vitality and cognitive rest, the next and often much harder challenge is protecting it. Protecting it from external social erosion. And that leads us directly and perfectly to the language of boundary setting.
This next section is a really deep dive into cultural pragmatics. These are the unwritten rules of social language. And it's so important because, it's easy to say yes to an invitation.
Of course. It's the path of least resistance.
It is. It's cooperative. It reinforces social bonds immediately. But declining an invitation, that's a negotiation. And it requires immense linguistic finesse because it risks disrupting that social harmony. This is a truly advanced skill.
And the sources make a crucial observation about English communication, particularly in professional or friendly contexts, that you just have to internalize. A blunt, direct refusal. Something like, no, I don't want to go, or no, I'm not interested.
Which might be perfectly fine in other cultures.
Right. But in this context, it's often perceived not just as abrupt, but as actively abrasive or even hostile.
Yeah, we live in a very high context culture when it comes to social refusal. And since a direct no is so often socially unacceptable, the English language is just filled with these rich devices that are designed to soften the rejection. This necessitates the use of extensive hedging.
Hedging, define that for us.
Hedging is basically using linguistic buffers. They are words and phrases that minimize the threat to the inviter's face or their ego. You're creating a cushion around the no.
And this brings us to the key strategic social tool, the soft no. It allows you to protect your schedule, protect your personal time, that valuable avocation time we were just talking about, without damaging the relationship with the person who extended the offer.
That's the key. It's truthful about your availability without being brutal about your priorities.
Let's get a bit technical for a moment on the structure of that hedging. A proficient C2 speaker doesn't just say no in a gentle tone of voice. They use complex linguistic structures.
They do. This includes using modal verbs to express penativeness. So you might say, I might not be able to make it, rather than the very final, I won't be there.
So it introduces a bit of uncertainty.
It does. And they also employ the passive voice or impersonal constructions. For example, it looks like the timing won't work for me, instead of the more confrontational, I am rejecting your timing.
That's a great analysis. I mean, it literally moves the rejection from a personal choice you are making to an impersonal circumstance that is happening to you.
Exactly. You subtly transfer the blame from yourself to some external, uncontrollable force, like the timing.
So clever. Now, let's explore the key phrases the sources recommend for navigating this. One of the most common and I think most robust phrases for general unavailability is, I'm afraid I have a prior engagement.
And the material analyzes this phrase brilliantly. Prior engagement is highly formal. You'd hear it from, a diplomat or a corporate executive. And that formality is precisely its strength.
Why is that a strength?
Because its genius lies in its dual function. First, it is perfectly vague, so it protects your privacy completely. You don't have to specify if the engagement is a work deadline, a doctor's appointment,
or just 2 hours you've scheduled to sit on your couch and stare at the wall.
Exactly. 2 hours of dedicated flow state time on your avocation. And second, and this is crucial, that formality makes an engagement sound utterly valid and unquestionable. You are signaling that your time is managed, your schedule is fixed, and therefore any further probing or trying to convince you would be a serious social breach.
It's like putting up a polite but very firm linguistic wall.
It's the perfect linguistic wall. There are simpler alternatives that can achieve a similar result, maybe in a more casual context. Things like, I'm already booked up, or my schedule is packed this weekend. The message is ultimately the same. The resource, your time, is depleted.
And speaking of resource depletion, we have to break down that wonderful, highly descriptive idiom for expressing that you're overworked and have limited capacity. I'm spread a bit thin this weekend.
Oh, this idiom is so deeply evocative and highly proficient. When you say you are spread thin, you're using a material metaphor. You're talking about a resource like butter or jam being applied over a surface that is just too large. And the result is you get insufficient coverage and poor quality everywhere.
It instantly conveys a sense of burnout or like time bankruptcy. You're telling the inviter that your capacity, your energy, your focus, your time, that is the absolute constraint. It's not their specific invitation.
Yes. And this strategically frames the rejection as an unfortunate circumstance of your life, not a deliberate rejection of their company. It's so much emotionally safer for the person who invited you.
Now, the social challenge really intensifies when the rejection isn't based on your availability, but it's based purely on you disliking the activity itself.
Oh, it's so much harder to manage.
It is, because the inviter can perceive their taste or the offer itself as being judged and rejected.
And the sources address this by providing a really critical strategy. Validate the offer, then decline.
Validate, then decline.
Validation is absolutely essential. You must acknowledge the kindness or the thoughtfulness or just the quality of the invitation before you introduce the rejection. You have to signal, this is a good offer, it's just not suitable for me.
And the specific language here is so key to the soft no. You might say something like, that's very kind of you to ask, but horror movies aren't really my forte.
Yes, and we should clarify forte here. In this context, this suggests a strength or a talent or a favorite activity. Saying something is not your forte implies a lack of enjoyment or natural aptitude for that specific thing. So it makes it a matter of personal suitability rather than a criticism of horror movies.
Or you could use the quintessential gentle rejection idiom, they are not my cup of tea.
That phrase is just beautiful in its simplicity and its effectiveness. It equates a preference for an activity to a completely subjective, non-confrontational choice, like how you take your coffee.
Or your tea.
Or your tea, exactly. It's inherently subjective and completely non-judgmental. Both forte and cup of tea successfully shift the focus from rejecting the person who invited you to simply declining a specific activity.
So let's tie all of this together into the optimal structure, the social calculus that allows the learner to execute a perfect soft no. The structural formula is, I think, intuitive for a C2 speaker, but it needs to be explicitly taught.
It does. And this is the four-part structure designed for maximum social cohesion. So first, gratitude. Thank you so much for thinking of me. You have to acknowledge their effort.
Step one. Got it.
Second, rejection. I won't be able to make it this time. Notice it's clear, it's definitive, but the phrase this time makes it temporary.
Okay, good point.
Third, reason. This is optional, but it's very strategic. I'm afraid I have a prior commitment I need to prepare for. You use that strategic vagueness to protect your avocation time.
Right, the prior engagement.
And fourth, and this is the critical social salve, future possibility. But let's definitely take a Wayne check.
That fourth step is the social lubricant. It's what keeps everything moving smoothly. It confirms you're rejecting the timing or the activity in this one instance, but not the person or the relationship.
It preserves the bond. It mitigates the finality of the refusal.
And that final idiom, take a rain check, that is one you absolutely must master.
You have to.
Could you give us that memorable detail on the etymology again? Because I think it really helps anchor the meaning for people.
Yeah, absolutely. It originated in 19th century American baseball. If a game was rained out, spectators were literally given a physical voucher, a rain check, that allowed them to come back and attend a future rescheduled game.
So it was a literal check for a rained out game.
It was. And its modern usage means exactly that, to postpone or reschedule for a later unspecified date. It is the perfect linguistic tool for mitigating disappointment while maintaining that social connection.
You know, this raises an important question that we've been hinting at. How do these deep politeness strategies actually reinforce social cohesion, even when you're literally saying no to someone?
Well, they act as this continuous proactive maintenance of the social fabric. By employing a soft no, you are demonstrating a profound respect for the inviter's time and their effort. I mean, they took the social risk of inviting you in the first place.
True.
And you're doing that while simultaneously protecting your own personal boundaries and resources. It turns what could be a point of conflict, the refusal, into an act of relational consideration. It signals, I value you, but I must also value my commitment to myself.
And that self-commitment, that's exactly what enables the fulfillment that we are about to discuss. The successful soft no is the guardian of your non-work time, and specifically, it's the guardian of your avocations.
So we've established the physical need for vitality and the social need for boundaries. Now we pivot the conversation inward toward personal fulfillment and the creation of meaning outside of external mandates. The sources beautifully labeled the weekend as the sanctuary for our avocations.
And that distinction is just paramount. We have to start by rigorously defining avocation. It's not just a hobby, it's a calling, a serious hobby, a secondary occupation pursued purely for pleasure and fulfillment, never primarily for money.
Right.
It is the thing you do because you want to do it, a pursuit driven entirely by internal desire.
And this sets up the critical psychological contrast with our professional lives.
Yeah.
When we talk about jobs or careers, they are typically, though not exclusively, extrinsically motivated.
Meaning they're driven by external rewards.
It's exactly. Salary, a hierarchical position, a promotion, public recognition. These are all things that are outside the activity itself. They are the prize you get for doing the work.
But hobbies and avocations, they operate on a completely different internal architecture. They are intrinsically motivated. The drive comes from the sheer joy of the activity itself. Whether that joy is from the challenge, the creativity, the soothing repetition, whatever it is. The reward is the process, not the paycheck or the bonus.
It's the difference between doing something to get a result, which is extrinsic, and doing something because the doing is the result. That's intrinsic. And that intrinsic motivation is precisely why avocations are so deeply restorative. They engage a completely different reward pathway in the brain.
And as we engage in these self-selected, enjoyable activities, they contribute fundamentally to a sense of mastery. It's this continuous, low-stakes development of a skill outside the highly pressurized, constantly evaluated environment of work.
And the language we use to describe this process of mastery is highly nuanced. It reflects different levels of commitment and purpose. The source material provides 3 excellent verbs to capture this continuum of engagement, and it's really useful to contrast them sharply.
So first, we have tinkering. This is often used when describing work on mechanical or technical things, right? Like restoring an old car or custom building a computer rig.
Yes, tinkering implies experimentation, trial and error, a really playful approach, and often a lack of formal training or blueprints. It's hands-on, it can be messy, and crucially, the goal is not perfection or profit. The goal is the process itself and making small, non-essential improvements.
So if you're tinkering, you're really embracing the process of this playful, maybe slightly chaotic investigation.
Exactly. You aren't afraid to break things because you are learning how to fix them. The learning is the point.
Okay, then we shift to a more casual, creative pursuit. Dabbling, often used when exploring artistic fields, maybe dabbling in watercolors or dabbling in a new language.
Dabbling suggests trying something out without a serious long-term commitment or high expectations. It's explicitly low pressure. It allows for exploration and enjoyment of the creative process, the texture of the paint, the sound of a new language, without the stress of having to produce a masterpiece or achieve fluency.
It gives you permission to fail.
It grants permission for failure as part of the fun. You're just playing.
And finally, the highest level of commitment in personal skill development. Honing a musical skill or honing one's technique in woodworking.
Yeah, honing suggests the focused, deliberate refinement of an existing, already competent ability. It implies precision, repetition, and a conscious dedication to moving from good to excellent through dedicated practice. Like sharpening a blade, it speaks to efficiency and focus.
Right.
A C2 speaker understands that you don't hone a skill you just started. You dabble when you start. You hone an avocation you have been dedicated to for years.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting for me. The psychological difference. Let's talk about the unique restorative power of the creative outlet that avocations provide, specifically the tangible result they offer.
Yes. The expert sources contrast the results of avocations with the typical output of the modern office. Our jobs so often produce abstract or digital results.
Emails sent, spreadsheets updated, conceptual strategies written.
Right. And these results are often ephemeral. They're easily deleted, they're conceptual, they lack physical weight, you can't hold an email.
But an avocation, particularly a physical craft, it often yields something tactile, A piece of furniture you built, a quilt you knitted, a poem you printed out, a perfectly fixed engine that now purrs.
And this tangibility is such a powerful psychological anchor. It is a verifiable monument to your focused effort, and it's completely independent of external validation or a salary. You can point to it and say, I made that.
And this leads us directly to the peak experience of intrinsic motivation. A psychological state so restorative and crucial for mental health that it's become a necessary term in advanced communication. The flow state.
The concept of flow. It was originally coined by the Hungarian psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, but now it's part of the C2 lexicon because it perfectly describes that ultimate state of total absorption.
So we need to define this precisely, technically. What is flow?
Flow state is not just being interested in something. It is the feeling when you are so completely engrossed in an activity, that avocation, that time seems to disappear.
Yeah.
You lose self-consciousness, the activity feels completely effortless, yet it's totally engaging.
Time disappears.
And crucially, the sources emphasize 3 key characteristics that are necessary to achieve this state.
Okay, what's the first one?
1, you must have clear goals. You know exactly what you are trying to achieve next, whether it's the next knitting stitch or the next sentence of your novel. There's no ambiguity.
Got it. Clear goals. Number 2.
2, you must receive immediate feedback. You know instantly whether what you are doing is working or not. The paint is either blending correctly or it isn't. The code compiles or it doesn't.
And 3, and this is the most critical component from what I read, there must be a balance of skill and challenge.
This is the secret sauce. If the task is too easy, you get bored. You check out. If it's too hard, you get frustrated and anxious and you want to quit. Flow happens in that perfect sweet spot where the challenge slightly exceeds your current skill, forcing you to grow and to concentrate.
And the sources connect the dots for us. Flow state is the ultimate intrinsic reward. It is the deep, restorative joy that makes the sacrifice of weekend time so worthwhile. It provides a deep mental rest and fulfillment that, sedentary relaxation rarely achieves.
It's active meditation through focused creation or action.
And this full circle brings us right back to section 2. The soft no, that polite refusal, is essentially the act of setting a strategic boundary to protect the time required to engage in the specific avocation necessary to achieve that deep, restorative flow state.
They are completely interconnected.
So we've successfully used the weekend to achieve vitality, manage our social obligations, find intrinsic joy. But as Sunday afternoon fades into evening, a psychological shadow often begins to fall.
Yes.
We must now address the pervasive cultural phenomenon known as the Sunday scaries.
This phenomenon, which is also commonly referred to as the Sunday blues, is a widely recognized cultural experience, especially in developed economies, where that separation between the professional and the personal week is so stark.
And if we define it simply, it's that creeping feeling of anxiety or apprehension or even dread that sets in typically between, say, 4 p.m. and 8 p.m. on a Sunday evening.
Right, as the sun starts to go down.
Exactly, as the concrete reality of Monday morning rapidly approaches. And it's essential to distinguish this from, clinical depression. This is specifically anticipatory anxiety focused on future work demands.
And the linguistic expression of this feeling is very, very revealing. The expert sources highlight the key verb used to describe the approaching work week: looming.
Looming.
When Monday morning is described as looming, it suggests something large, threatening, and approaching rapidly or indistinctly. It's this big, dark shape on the horizon.
Looming carries that sense of inexorability and size. It's a very visual metaphor. The remaining weekend time just shrinks minute by minute, and in the anxious mind, the weight of the week ahead grows disproportionately large and vague and menacing. It's the psychological opposite of the clarity we were seeking when we were clearing the cobwebs.
And the anxiety spikes then, because Sunday evening functions as a temporal landmark. It is the last moment of true, unstructured freedom. And its ending forces the mind to begin processing all the complexity and demands of the approaching week. The loss of control is a major anxiety trigger.
So recognizing and naming this feeling, the Sunday scaries, is the first step. The next is discussing the common, highly effective strategies people use to combat this dread. The sources refer to these strategies collectively and very simply as prep or preparation.
And these are just small, intentional acts of organization. You do them on Sunday. And they are designed to proactively give you a psychological and logistical head start. They reduce the friction of Monday morning.
They aren't grand tasks, they're micro adjustments.
Exactly. And specific examples provided include meal prep for the week, which eliminates that morning decision fatigue around what to eat, or the specific ritual of drafting a clear, concise to-do list.
Let's talk about the cognitive science behind that for a second. Why does making a list actually work?
Well, drafting a clear list is a psychological transfer mechanism. You take the nebulous, formless anxiety, that feeling of being overwhelmed by unknown, potentially endless tasks, and you give it a clear, external, defined structure. You literally externalize the anxiety from your head onto the paper.
So when the tasks are just mental noise, they feel infinite.
They do, but when you write them down, you confirm that the list has an end. You have translated the feeling of everything into these 6 specific items. It makes the daunting, looming list manageable.
So the goal of this Sunday prep is twofold. First, to mitigate that anticipatory anxiety in the moment on Sunday night.
And second, to prevent that feeling of being overwhelmed the second Monday morning arrives. It intentionally smooths the psychological transition from the unstructured freedom of your avocation back into the structured demands of extrinsic work.
And the psychological takeaway here provides a perfect synthesis for this entire deep dive. A successful weekend isn't defined merely by how many vigorous activities or fun social events you manage to cram in.
No. Ultimately, success is measured by the ability to ensure that you are mentally equipped for the week ahead. It's the successful facilitation of a smooth psychological transition, ensuring that the vitality and intrinsic fulfillment you gain from your avocations aren't immediately wiped out by poorly managed anticipatory anxiety. The act of proactive planning itself is, fundamentally, a component of active recovery.
What a detailed excavation. I mean, we've gone into the language and the strategy of weekend mastery, moving from just simple descriptions of rest and into this sophisticated linguistic world that's required for true C2 communication.
Yeah, to quickly recap the journey and reinforce the key terminology, we began with vigorous vocabulary, right? We discussed the concept of active recovery as that physical antidote.
Right.
And that delightful idiom of clearing the cobwebs through exertion.
We then navigated the subtle social rules of politeness strategies, mastering the structural formula of the soft no, and learning the crucial idiom of taking a rain check to preserve social cohesion while protecting our personal time.
Then we moved inward to the vocabulary of the hobbyist. We explored the difference between intrinsic motivation and extrinsic rewards. We contrasted the varying levels of engagement captured by verbs like tinkering and honing.
And we analyzed the criteria for achieving that amazing restorative flow state.
And finally, we identified the widespread cultural phenomenon of the Sunday scaries, that anticipatory anxiety captured by the verb looming, and the importance of strategic prep to manage the psychological transition.
You know, the weekend really is a crucible. It requires physical stamina, complex social negotiation, and personal dedication to fulfillment. And by mastering this advanced language, you achieve not only nuance and depth in describing your downtime, but also a much deeper comprehension of the psychology and the social contracts that govern our leisure.
And the ultimate application of this knowledge is strategic. So consider this final thought, something for you to mull over as you plan your upcoming time off. Think about how mastering the soft no isn't just about surface-level politeness or avoiding conflict.
It's deeper than that.
It's so much deeper. When you successfully, yet politely, decline an unnecessary social commitment or a prior engagement, you are actively protecting the precious space necessary for your avocation. And protecting that time is perhaps the single most crucial tool you have for achieving the essential flow state, that profound feeling of restorative joy that ensures your entire week, not just your weekend, begins from a position of renewed strength and clarity. That is the true power of strategic linguistic mastery.